All right, SIP episode 92, and we have a fantastic topic for you. Custom crush facilities. We've all had that dream of sitting in wine country thinking to ourselves, hey, we should make wine. Tonight's episode, we explore everything required to make that dream a reality, and we do it with Barry Waitte, owner and custom crush facility operator at Tamber Bey Vineyards. Get ready, this is a treat. My name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels and SIP host this evening. SIP host every Friday night, as a matter of fact, because if it's Friday, it's SIP. And by the way, next Friday, if it's Friday, it's Bring a Friend to SIP Day. That should be every Friday. Tonight, we've got a very, very special guest, which I'm thrilled to get into a little bit of dialogue on something that we've all thought of at one point in time or another. I'll tease that in a second. Eric, hello to you. Jeff and Jane are in the house. Jeff and Jane are lifers as it relates to Cellar Angels SIP attendees. But I do want to let all of you know that this is what it's all about. You are the wine heroes. So for those of you that are new, we hold the word hero very, very sacred at Cellar Angels because it is not a Marvel comic person. It is Aristotle. It is heroes in the Aristotelian time were protectors and defenders with the strength of two. And all of you are protectors and defenders of the limited production winery. So you buy wine from Cellar Angels, you are helping these wineries grow, you're helping them survive. And that, by the way, is something to be exalted and cherished. That's why we call you wine heroes. Or if you look in the dictionary, Wikipedia, I think, actually has an asterisk now where it says sea sipsters. But we're going to talk about a topic tonight, which all of you have had a glass of wine and you've thought about this when you're up in the valley. And I will ask and tease it with the question, what are the 4 most expensive words you've ever thought of that have cost you a fortune? Well, actually, that's the wrong slide. Will you marry me is not the 4 most expensive words. It is when you're sitting at a property like the one behind me and you might have had a glass or two of wine and their charcuterie tray is all but empty and you're hearing the horses whinny and you're looking at the scenery and you think to yourself, we should make wine. We could do this. If you've been out to the valley, you've had that epiphany. And there's a gentleman with us this evening who is going to share with us the entire start to finish process of what making wine in the valley requires at a custom crush facility. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to the proprietor of Tamber Bey, a friend of the family of Cellar Angels, and someone who we look up to and admire greatly, ladies and gentlemen, Barry Waitte.
Martin, you are a trip. I'm still cooking on those 4 words. And I think you were right on the first one, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you put that in there for a reason. But hey, everybody!
I didn't say it was bad. I just said it was expensive.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Good investment. Well, pleasure to be with you, Martin, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience. It's a pleasure.
Oh, and we're delighted. And I'm going to ask for a show of hands who's been to Tamber Bey, and you can respond in the chat. It is a very, very special property. It's extremely up valley in the terms of Napa Valley. It's, north of the Calistoga area, but boy, it's a special, special place. And we've been sending people there for going on about 5 years. And every single person comes back and just marvels at the property and quite honestly, the hospitality, because you can go to any tasting room you want in Napa or Sonoma and the wine could be good, but if the experience is suboptimal, that's what you remember. And I think that's something that Barry instills in his people, because I know it's near and dear to him. And there's an old saying that says grass isn't going to grow under this person's feet. Grass is not grown under Barry Waite's feet. I can tell you that. He's retired, quote, from the business world, but even art can't find him. He's so busy. So I would like to know, Barry, or please share with our audience a little bit about kind of before wine, Barry in the Valley, Barry growing up and going to college, and what you wanted to do out of college and where you landed.
So I went to college on a baseball scholarship. And so I played 4 years there while getting a degree in business and finance. I had a very good college career, but I had a very poor pro career. Though drafted in the 28th round by the San Diego Padres, I went to single A ball, and I got promptly demoted. That's pretty hard to do. I never got a starting job. So I realized, as my father said, my ambitions and my aspirations and my ability were not well aligned. So I came back to the Bay Area where I grew up. I was born in San Francisco, raised in the Bay Area. And I was enamored with computers back in college. And this is, this is 1979, 1980. And so I got a job at a computer company called Tektronix, not material at the moment, big company, so forth. About a year into it, I had a fortuitous meeting with a gentleman that I got into an argument with at a party, and it turned out that he liked the argument. I didn't really care for it, but his name was Steve Jobs. And he somehow found me a couple of days later and had someone call me and say, "Hey, why don't you have that guy come over and let's talk to him?" What I found out with Steve, by the way, is that Steve loved confrontation. He felt that those contentious environments really promote thought and stretching of envelopes and so forth. So he actually promoted it. So even though we had this argument, and by the way, the argument was about computing. We had some theoretical, how important are you in the business? And I quite frankly said, that little box you're producing is never going to be a serious computer. So see how I was going. But anyway, so I spent 14 years at Apple. Wow. I loved it. I thought I'd only go there for a year, and I ended up 14 years, moved 5 times with the company, kept coming back to the headquarters, and then, got into upper and senior management. But at that 14-year mark, the company wasn't doing all that well. Steve was, for those that follow it, was long gone. He left in 1985, and I stayed there until 1994. And then I went to work for a small company. We're in digital design, and the claim of fame of this little company is we designed the interface to AOL. And it was such a poorly run application that we gave them. They couldn't operate it, so they bought us. And so I spent 4 more years at AOL. And then I did a little venture work after that, and starting companies and things of that nature. I'm an entrepreneur. I found that out at Apple when Apple was not an entrepreneur, and I was far beyond that. I went to work for a small company. What I got into at AOL after my first year there is helping them acquire small companies, and I still just enjoyed that small, feisty little environment that we're developing, neat stuff and not so, bureaucratic. So anyway, that's what happened that got me, to where I am in a sense. Martin, if I can just, you want me to keep going? Because there's
no, I want to try to tie 2 things together. There's a lot of parallels to that feistiness, and I've always analogous to that, to the David v. Goliath type of mentality, where you're starting off very entrepreneurial. I've always worked for startups and entrepreneurial companies, but you're always taking on the 900-pound gorillas and the behemoths and stuff like that. And at some point in time, after 14 years with Apple, and then, X number of years with AOL, somehow or another, your proximity to wine country has to intersect. And so how did you get exposed to wine? Because in the late 70s, early 80s, the computer companies that were out there were Radio Shack and what have you, and just coming onto the market. And then B, the wine scene was insignificant. So how did you cross that chasm?
Yeah, so let's just go back. You have to go back all the way to 1959. It's the first time I came to Napa. It's also how old I am. Actually, 2 years old at that time. My parents were from the East Coast, and when they came out to California, and I was born after 2 years, they said, "Let's go on vacation somewhere close by," and it's always in August, as it is in the East Coast. And so they chose St. Helena, California. And so a week for a couple of years turned to 2 weeks, then turned into a month. And so literally, as I grew up, my summer vacations were in Napa Valley. We weren't up here, I'd say they weren't up here for the wine, though it was kind of part of it. But as you know, back in the 60s, if there were 5 wineries open, there was nothing there. So I just had this nice memory of that. So I put a pin in that. I go to college. My last year in college, I'm working in a liquor store, wine store. And, at the time I'm drinking wine like all of us in college, for quantity. And, but my owner would come in every once in a while of the store and let us drink some wine and stuff like that. He'd open it, and he was pretty cool about it. Well, one day he went over to the fine wine selection and brought 1 bottle back. And when I tasted that, it was a pivot point. It just, exploded in my palate. And, I didn't know the word palate, by the way, at that time. How about just my mouth? It just exploded. Wonderful flavors. I said, what is this? Told me what it was. And he says, oh, by the way, there's all these other wines that are like this as well. What I drank was a 1974 Beaulieu Vineyards George Latour. That's what he introduced me to. And then he says, look, there's Charles Krug, there's Robert Mondavi, there's Inglenook. And he just kept going down this line. And I just like, oh my God, this is fantastic. So I started at the bright age of 21 to actually drink fine wine out of Napa. I quickly kind of pivoted, finding that, Bordeaux is actually, even of higher esteem, got my dad involved. And so through my 20s, just started drinking, collecting a little bit, selling a few wines, this and that nature. And when I got into management at Apple, I started to think, well, where would be a great offsite for my team? Let's take our 5-10 people and go off and do somewhere. And I just chose Napa because I had some basis to it. And I had been up there a few other times as an adult. And that just started a stream that was just fantastic. The environment of where I live now, of this relaxation, and there's this impetus on lifestyle and things of that nature, was a wonderful place to bring people to have freedom of thought while we have these offsites. And then we had some great experiences after that. So that's kind of where the crescendo started to come to play with of doing all this. And then as my tech career, as I don't want to say closing it down because I didn't know at the time, but I look at Martin, we talked about this. I had a few good hits, right? And this is what we aspire to in life. Mine were I was very lucky that they happened somewhat early in my life. And so I had this point of opportunity to do what I wanted to do. And after careful thought and not wanting to necessarily continue in the tech world, I thought, what is the most important thing to me? And it's lifestyle. And you think about it, that's all what we're after. Where you live, what you do, where you go on vacation, things of that nature. So I said, I want to go live in wine country. As a matter of fact, that place I kind of grew up in? Wow, I have such comfort when I come up here. So not a long process, but then in 1999, I kind of cashed out of everything, and I picked up all my toys and came up here and bought a property, then the next one. And, here I am 23 years later, kind of firmly in the business.
And one of the things that I'm now marveling at is how similar our two career paths have been, other than I was not a collegiate baseball player. I did not work at a startup like Apple. All of those things notwithstanding, I did work at a liquor store in college. So the parallels are endless between our two paths.
There you go. Incredible. You're a brother from another mother. I get it, man.
That's exactly right. All right. So we're going to get into the topic of this evening, custom crush, because, and I'll actually put up a poll question for everybody, because you hit upon something which is fascinating as it relates to the number of wineries in Napa Valley. And so when you were talking about, when you came here as a child and you were 2 through 10 with the family and stuff, there was 5 wineries, and some of those are still around, but for the most part, they are not. And today, to the audience, I'm curious, approximately how many licensed wineries are there in Napa today? So we're going to give you a second while I grab a little fluid. And we do have out-of-town company in the house, so I did have a glass of wine earlier. So just to get the creative thoughts going, that's always par for the course. And the gummies were probably ill-advised. I probably shouldn't have done that.
Love it.
Okay, here we go.
Licensed
5,
wineries.
4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so interestingly enough, there is a couple verbiage terms here that give you a clue to the question. So the first one is approximately. So this is not an exact science because this number changes quite a bit. The other one is licensed wineries, not physical wineries, not wineries with tasting rooms or anything like that. There are several people, actually, there's only 2 people that have the correct answer. As of the Wine Institute's data in June of 2021, there are 1,700 wineries in Napa County, licensed wineries. So that is a large amount. And interestingly enough, I was doing some reading in prep for this. During the 90s, Napa used to add about 5 to 10 wineries per year. In the last 3 years, they've averaged 130 wineries per year of growth. So
Yep.
there's more and more people that have not taken Barry's advice that we're going to get into here about don't do this type of thing. But I want to get to our second question because it is more germane to what people think of when they think of wineries. So how many of these Napa wineries actually possess a physical tasting room? And there is no Jeopardy music, but those of you of a certain age can hear it in the back of your head, can't you? So we're going to give this one also 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, 88% participation. And this time everybody seems to be spot on, or they were Googling it on the first one. And this one was a byproduct of the meta answer. So yes, there are 400 wineries that have tasting rooms. So when you think about that, that's 1,300 that don't. And so the question is, well, where on earth do these 1,300 people produce? How do they get their fruit? And Barry has an answer, and it's called a custom crush facility. So define for us, Barry, what that actually is.
So a little bit of terminology there. You keep bringing up the word tasting room, and a tasting room is not a manufacturing facility. So that number 400 actually goes south of how many manufacturing facilities or places where we can vinify the wine. Those are considered what we classically think of as a winery. Now let's just draw back just a little bit. There are 3 major processes in the wine business, and people can participate in 1, 2, or all 3, or in different segments of them. So first of all, growing. Right behind me is my vineyard in Oakville. So you can be a grower. And what's interesting about that is 50% of the vines in Napa Valley are farmed by growers, and that's all they do is they grow and they sell wine to wineries. Okay. And then you make wine. And these are the places that have the big fermentation tanks and barrels and so forth. And that's what we'll spend most of our time on, obviously. And then there's the last part of sales and marketing, right? So once that wine is bottled, now what do? You got to sell it. You got to distribute it. You got to do this, got to do that. So those are the 3 major segments. And if you think about it, you can participate in just one of those and be in the wine business. 2 or 3, goes there. I chose all 3. Yeah. And actually I've got kind of a swag on a 4th. Let's just say I've amplified on one of the 3 in kind of a big way. So when I got into the business, I didn't know how big I wanted to be. And so a practice that had started up not too much before I got there was making wine in someone else's winery. And the federal government will allow you to do that. There's all kinds of licenses you can get for it. But I made wine, and in the time before I got to my own winery, I made my wine in 3 different facilities, right? And we call this in custom crush. So my first one was down in Sonoma. It was a winery called Nicholson Ranch. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to one on top of Howell Mountain called Outpost. And then there's one that is called just The Ranch, and it is now owned by the Gallo Company. So they've bought it and kicked everybody out, but that was long after I left to do that. But each one of those just allowed us to come in and make wine in their facility. So custom crush, as you saw, is now the majority of where people, at least numbers of wineries, make wine. It is still the minority by a long shot of volume, right? In that respect. Some wineries don't do this. And you typically see the big wineries or the really highfalutin wineries, they don't allow anybody in, right? They just want to keep it to themselves, and for good reasons and so forth. There are other facilities that's all they do is custom crush. They don't make wine for themselves. And so, but that's a new phenomenon. We haven't, when I got into business, that wasn't available. So that was 23 years ago, but we see some of those today. And probably one of the biggest ones here in Napa, though they do make a little bit of wine for themselves, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what they make, is called Laird, Laird. Yep. And they have multiple facilities all through Napa. Lots of people make wine there. But now there's some custom crush only facilities that have started up, because this is a very predominant way of getting into the business. And if you think about it, this is a very capital intensive business. So one way to do this is don't build a winery. And if you do build a winery, you're going to have to build it at a certain size out the gate. So you can build up to that. And that was my business plan, is to work up about 10 years until I had enough volume to do it. And then I built my own facility. So do you want me to, I know we talked about this. Do you want me to kind of go through the process, or do you have some other?
Not yet.
Okay.
I have
Get it?
I have a question that is actually Jeff actually asked it as well with regards to how does it work? And here's my envision. I'm envisioning this like a wedding planner where I walk into a custom crush facility or I set an appointment with Barry and you've got a la carte menu of things. You open up a book and, it's like, do you want this beautiful, blah, 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 label, bottles, barrels, or do you already have wine and a grower and you just need to process here? I mean, what is the overall process of how someone would say, let's say Jim Bocci, who I see is on, Jeff, Julie, and I decide, and Kent, I wrote Kent into this, and Mark.
Yeah. So, first of all,
we've got like $8 to $10 a piece. And we're interested in getting into the wine business.
Yeah, that's your success ratio right there, is capital investment in doing it. So you want to get into the wine business, and I get this quite a bit here. And we have 2 new clients coming in this year. They came to us and said, I want to make wine. We heard you guys are good, so forth and so on. And so I counsel them through, which is actually, if I could just sidebar this for a second,
yes.
Which is really fun because what are they? They are entrepreneurs in the wine business. They're brand new. And I get a chance to mentor these folks in a way that I know a lot about it now, but it's not just the growing or the winemaking. It's also the business decisions that you have to make in this. And you start with some business decisions. What do you think your focus is? What kind of wines do you like to make, and so forth? Let's get down to this.
Does that still excite you? Does that still ramp you up?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love it. It's fantastic. Just again, another sidebar is I'm on the advisory, not the advisory. I am an advisor to the dean of the business school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for the School of Entrepreneurism, and their program is fabulous. And I have part of the program advisory, plus I advise kids, old enough to say that they are kids, in projects that go. And if I could tell you how successful the school is, they just breached over $300 million in capital raise done by the kids for their Series A, Bs, and Cs of companies. It's absolutely amazing. But that's a little about this, and very few of them are wine related. So they're just businesses. But it's a little bit of what we do here. And so you can get in the wine business with your $10. And this is how you do it. You go buy fruit from somebody. Now, I don't offer fruit for sale from Tamber Bay often. Sometimes I do, but really don't. But there's plenty of opportunity to do it, and there's ways to do it of just buying fruit. So if you're a Cabernet lover, a Pinot lover, so forth, there's a couple places that are good classifieds of I got fruit available for sale. So you have to have a fruit source. And so you can either grow it, you can buy it, you can steal it. Anyway, I don't really care as a custom crush. I'm just going to get this fruit that you have some responsibility for. So once you do that, most custom crush facilities like ours, we do not provide direct wine making services. What I mean by that is you need to get a winemaker. Because your style, and Martin, your particular style of Cabernet is very unique to you, and you need a partner who is going to be the CEO of that process. And once you lock and load with that person is going to give us instructions saying, I've got 3 tons of Cabernet coming in. I want it pressed this way. I want, fermentation to happen this way, so much on. So you're going to have your CEO of winemaking on there. And we presently at Tamber Bay, we have 4 different winemakers that we work with. 2 of them are 90% of our projects. So I have 2 winemakers. They're big name winemakers, and they have multiple clients, and that's really good for them, right? Because they little economies of scale. When they're here, they can look at all their, one of them has 12 clients here. Boom, 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 boom. He goes all the way through it. So you get your winemaker, you get your source of fruit. Now we're really talking. What I provide is that mid-level service of vinification, and I take the process from when the grapes hit my deck. I mean, literally show up some morning, we take over. And at the end of the day, we will deliver finished bottles. It's your label, it's your juice, it's your glass, but we did everything in between. The only other thing that is worth noting is it's also your barrels. And your winemaker working with us will order barrels wherever they come from. In our facility, it's all French, even with all of my custom crush clients. So again, you own the grapes, which turn into juice, go into a barrel, you own that. And then it goes into a bottle, you own that. But everything in between, when it goes into our tanks, we're going through our pumps, everything like that, that is the services that we provide. Now, with a custom crush facility, there are two very different ways of doing this, and this makes total sense. One of which is you sign up with somebody that does it on a potpourri basis. And when you have a pump over, you get a check and it costs you, $88, so on and so on. So you'll get a bill and it's just line itemed all the way down. And the place that I referred to earlier called the ranch that I was at did it that way. Because of that experience, I don't do it that way. It's a nightmare to verify, to do cost accounting, to figure out how much you're spending, especially if you have multiple years inside a winery, which you will. If you're in this game for 2 or 3 years, you're going to have multiple wines going through different.
Sure.
It is a nightmare. So we offer a program, which actually most of the high-end custom crush facilities do, to where we offer a full package deal. So we do everything for one price. And that's dictated by how long that wine is in our winery, right? So the gestation period, if it's if I remember my contract, if it's under 11 months, you pay the minimum amount. And if it's over 22 months, you pay the maximum amount. And it's by the ton, right? So fruit coming out of this vineyard will come in, we weigh it. And if it weighs, let's say 5 tons, I'm going to charge you 5 tons times that price. But that price is dictated on a schedule of 4 different zones of how long it's going to be in the winery. So I'll give you some numbers. For Cabernet Sauvignon, which is typically 18 months in barrel, 18, 20 months, that's $4,800 for us. So you can start doing your arithmetic. And if you really want to, $4,800 a ton from soup to nuts, all the way through, with one exception. I'll get to that in a minute. So you can do your math about how much it costs. Now, how much wine are you going to get out of a ton? About 60 cases.
Okay.
About 60. So 60 divided by 4,800 will give you your production costs. Okay. What you buy the fruit for is up to you. And that could be $1,000 a ton. It could be $10,000 a ton. Some of the best Cabernet in Napa Valley is selling for $50,000 a ton. Yikes. That's big.
Yeah.
That's big. So anyway, we sign this agreement. You start bringing in fruit, and we'll go through the process a little bit more. And then we get to the bottling, and I'm bringing that up now because that's the one thing that isn't in that contract, in that price. And why that's the case is we do 5 bottlings a year. They're all spaced out, and it's depending on how long wines are, in gestation and are ready to be bottled. And so typically our March bottling is all white wines. Our June is all reds. Our August one is Pinot Noirs, so forth and so on. And so what we do is we take all the wines that are going to be bottled from all the different clients, including mine, Tamber Bey. We get them all together. We bottle it out. We have a mobile bottling truck that comes in, and then we just divide the costs by how many cases we did. Martin, you did 100 cases. You get 100 divided by the 1,000, so you get 10% or whatever it might be. And that's costing. So it's very easy. We provide you, your winemaker, with a list of all the things we want to do, or we will do under that price. And if somebody wants something a little bit extra, you want a test we can't provide by our lab, you want to do some special fermentation in some certain way, well, we have additive costs there. But I'll tell you what, our soup to nuts program accomplishes about 98% of what people want to do.
All right, so let's pause there on the soup to nuts, because there's a ton of questions that I have. And if I can use your analogy a little bit and extend it on the CEO. So the winemaker is the CEO. You have 4 CEOs. What if I have a new CEO? Do you say, nope, these are the only 4 that are allowed to work at Tamber Bey? Well,
we'll entertain anybody. We will do a little bit of an interview to make sure this guy or gal knows what they're doing.
Right. Okay. So
the good news is the people that we've been approached with, they're all known entities in Napa Valley. Right. And matter of fact, you can come to me and say, hey, can you recommend some winemakers? And I know winemakers that are looking to pick up projects. And then you go meet and have a date and see if you guys want to get married. So, yeah.
Perfect. And then, so it sounds to me like these guys are the chefs or gals.
Yep.
And then you are providing all the sous chef work, all the prep work, everything like that. They've got the masterpiece vision of what the end dish is supposed to look like by the client, i.e. Martin. And then they instruct you. My first question comes into the production aspect, because you talked about 4 different bottlings per year. I'm sorry, 5. What if I'm scheduled for the June bottling and my wine we thought was going to be ready is not ready?
The beauty is I have 5 bottlings, and so it just gets bumped to the next one. That's actually very applicable right now, Martin, because we're having such supply chain issues that we just did a bottling 2 weeks ago, and one of my custom crush clients, their corks didn't show up in a supply chain. So what happens?
It's exactly why I was asking, because I know glass was in tight supply, and so there's so many things outside of your control.
Yeah, so we just bump it to the next one. So that's not a big deal. And depending on the wines, we just what we call suspend the wine, so it doesn't mature beyond its means to when we can bottle again. And if it's within a couple of months, there's no big deal whatsoever. So that's actually easy, and we now expect it. Every bottle we have now, things are getting bumped, and the things that get bumped get put to the next one, and so on.
And then before it gets bottled, obviously it's in barrel. Are the barrels there, or do you store them somewhere else?
No, we have full barrel storage. And so while we're there, here's my winery. I'll just go to the background. What you're looking at, and all these things across here, these are all the fermentation tanks. And so this is where the wine spends the initial part of their life. And then it goes into the barrel rooms into the back. I don't think I have a picture of the barrel rooms. I have pictures of barrels, but I don't think I have pictures of the rooms, as I'm kind of looking through my portfolio. My barrel room can hold 2,200 barrels. We've never exceeded 2,000 yet. So I think we overbuilt our barrel room for what is capacity for us in other places. You think this is a pretty long manufacturing process. There's lots of sequences, and there's pinch points that will dictate that we can't get any bigger than some of these pinch points. And what happens here in these tanks, this is our pinch point. We have more barrel capacity. So if I got more barrels and some other stuff, I could probably make more wine, but I'm not interested in that. I think we really like our size. Nice. But yeah, so the barrel, it goes into barrel. What's interesting, and we may talk about this a little later, then the wines go back into these tanks just before they go to bottling. If you think about it, we have, let's say we're going to make, 1,000 cases. Well, you know what? That's going to be, roughly 100. Is that 100? I got my math wrong. I'm not going to go through the math in my head, but let's say we got 25 or 30 barrels. Well, what we want to do is bring all those barrels of that wine into one tank and let that wine homogenize, because all those barrels are going to add different influences and all these good things. So if we let the wine homogenize for about a week, and then we usually go in with the winemaker, your winemaker. And by the way, same process I do for Tamber Bey with my winemaker, who's on site, 100% here. And we taste the wines, and it's just where we want to be, right? Because we do have our last moment. I mean, we're a week away from bottling. We can still influence this wine. We can do some things, put another varietal in, we can blend it. There's all kinds of things we can do in that final week to do it. But here's the thing you can't do. You can't take anything out. We can only add. So it's a one-way street there. So it's a wine will sit in this tank, and then the bottling truck comes up, and we literally take a hose from that tank into the bottling truck. And it goes one, and then on the other side of the bottling truck are cases, glass, bottles, corks, labels, everything. And inside that truck is a full manufacturing line that we can do about 3,000 cases a day. It's a lot of cases. It's maybe one of the most stressful days here at Tamber Bey when we do bottling, because the machine can break. I mean, the line can break, or 1,000 things can go wrong, so to speak. And that's the beauty of, or the mystery of winemaking is, when we get a grape in, we cannot make that wine any better than what the grape is when we get it. Can't. There's no possible way. And I'm not going to go down this path of we can do, artificial additives. Okay, so let's just stay away from that, because we don't do that. But you can't make it any better. But tell you what, I got a million ways I can make it worse. There's a process. So we have to be
that list is growing.
And, so 2 years ago, now it's 2019, we made 132 different wines from 22 wineries. 23, because Tamber Bey was one of them. And that was part of the 132 wines. So we got to be very slow. And so the big council we have for our team, which is 5 people full time, and then during harvest we have anywhere from 5 to 7 interns show up. Is we don't go by speed, not at all, because speed dictates errors. So it's all slow. Many of these checkpoints along the way are double checked. 2 people got to see it before it goes to the next phase, or 2 people have to clean a tank before we put another wine into it, so forth and so on. We have all these checks and balances to go on the way to make sure that, we don't put the wrong cork in the wine, or we don't double sulfur a wine, or all these crazy things that can go wrong. And that's what makes a really.
Are those checks and balances, were they from the school of hard knocks, or advice on elders, best practices, or all of the above?
Well, it's best practices, but it's by a specific individual. I was very fortunate back in 1999 that I was introduced to a very young winemaker by the name of Thomas Rivers Brown. And he either he joined me or I joined him. It was actually pretty mutual. We liked each other as people. We had very similar palates. We had very similar business philosophies going on. Now, Thomas has gone on to be one of the most revered winemakers. And Forbes magazine wrote 2 years ago that he's going to be recognized as maybe the best winemaker in history, period, in the world. He has more 100-point wines by Robert Parker and Cabernet than anybody in history, and not by a little. I mean, by a lot. He's in the second place person is like way behind. He's also a Pinophile. He's getting now very good scores on his Pinots. He deals with about 50 clients. I mean, he's huge. And I get the honor to say he's one of my best friends. He designed the facility. He designed all our protocols, our standard operating procedures. He's here every day because he's got all his clients. He has a wine called Rivers Marie, which is fantastic, which was made here until 2 years ago when he opened up his own facility. And what's ironic, he made a little facility for his place. And when he designed it, he thought he'd be this big. He's already this big. So we still make Rivers Marie here because his winery was too small. And so Thomas is the father of this place in all intents and purposes of design, process, and so forth. Now, that said, I have a director of winery operations who is also the Tamber Bay winemaker. And so he oversees everything. And he is not only Thomas Brown selected, he worked as assistant winemaker here with Thomas Brown. So he's got his style, but he also worked with Heidi Barrett. He worked with Aaron Pott. He worked with Michelle Rollon. And Derek is outstanding. What a smooth cat he is, with a guy that has his own vision. So he worked with all these people, which is great. But, being a protege to somebody doesn't mean you are going to be him or her. You should take those things and be your own person. And that's what Derek is. And so Derek and Thomas work together.
I have to do about 3 or 4 housekeeping things, and I have a bunch of questions. One, if people want to turn their cameras on, now is a good time to turn your cameras on. We're going to promote you and elevate you to host. The quiz contest winner, I forgot to mention Natalie. There was 9 correct answers, only 1 incorrect answer on the email blast that went out on Monday. And the first correct answer was received within 6 minutes of the transmission of that email. So I don't know if that person, Natalie, if you have some sort of an alert set up that when the Cellar Angels email quiz comes out, you get the inbox notification and bam, but there is no, it's Natalie. I can't say the last name. So congratulations to that. We're going to throw some points in your loyalty account, but also you mentioned the million things that can go wrong. And there's some I haven't even thought of. Who's liable in that capacity? How's the paperwork work if you put the wrong cork in and, all of that stuff? I understand mistakes happen, but that has got to be crazy. So how does that all work out?
Yeah, regrettably, at times mistakes do happen. We're very fortunate. Our track record is phenomenal, but mistakes do happen. We've never had a wine that came out wrong. We never put a cork in a wrong bottle. So that the mistakes that could potentially happen are there. We are liable to a point that our contract says we're liable. And, not going into specifics, we accept, the liability of it, but there is limitations to it, to which in my contract, I require my custom crush clients all to have insurance on top of that.
Right.
So when you say a mistake, so we got 2 issues, right? We've got the monetary piece, which insurance can cover. Then you have the quality of wine piece that it could be of liability. The good news is every mistake that we've ever made has been minor. and could be not only salvaged, but still came out as very fine wine. So we're fortunate that. Now, that said, there is mistake potential. There's mistake potential of a forklift knocking over barrels, and that happens.
There is when I'm driving it.
Yeah. There's other things that could be more demonstrable in the severity of it, which is why we double check. It's just why we go slow. There's some delicate things that go on here. So, knock on wood.
A situation where a mistake was made and then that wine went on to win a lot of points and there was a corrective measure? It says, hey, you're welcome.
Well, I can't actually answer that question because I don't necessarily follow all the wines that make it out of here. But I will tell you, we've never lost a client because of a mistake or even an argument. The beauty of our system here is we work with just very few winemakers, those CEOs, and we have a great trust factor with each other. It's all about communication. By the way, all those winemakers just give us instructions. Those winemakers are not hand-to-hand combat guys. They just give instructions. And then we report back results. We give them tests. They come in and tastes, so forth. But they're not doing the pump overs. They're not running around on the forklifts or anything like that. It's entirely our responsibility to do that.
And that's where I think that you talked about it earlier, that trust factor, and you work with such great winemakers. There's an amazing amount of trust from the client to the winemaker, because if the client is out of state, and many of them are, they have to trust that the winemaker is going there and they're thieving wine out of the barrel to see where it is and reporting back and doing the due diligence, because it can change, especially over 22 months, and that they're on top of it.
I told you, at the beginning, you've got to figure out who you're marrying. This is not a business relationship with your winemaker. You've got to have that artistic synergy between each other. And when Thomas and I got together, we spent 3 or 4 sessions just drinking wine together. Outside of having a great time, Thomas was really evaluating my palate because he wanted to make wine. When I tell him I want X, Y, and Z, he wants to make it in that style or that way and so forth. Turns out we just have very similar palates. So it was a very kind of easy gestation of that. Now he's got a client, I'm not kidding you on this. He's got a client that does Pinot Noir, but his command is, I want to make it taste like a Cabernet Sauvignon. What are you doing there, dude? And what he means by that is he wants that level of extraction to give it a base of tannins that most don't. And I'm going to leave the winery nameless at this point. And we do that. And so we actually make the wine in a process that's very much like a Cabernet, not like a Pinot Noir. And we achieve that. This guy sells these for $135 a bottle and gets it. He gets it. You will not find it on a retail shelf because it never makes it there.
No.
So we can do that. But again, we're doing it at the instructions of the winemaker. Now we entertain winemaker and clients here all the time. They're tasting their wines, they're tasting their barrel samples, so forth and so on. We even allow our custom crush clients to pour wines for future clients. So they have finished product, they can come into Tamber Bay and they can come into our courtyard and taste wines. I'm trying to see if I had, you had it on yours, but here's our courtyard. Today we had, all kinds of tastings here today. And a couple of the tastings were our clients tasting wines for their customers. And so we can provide that baseline of marketing services, at least for the face-to-face contact, that you don't get otherwise. Now, an interesting point in Napa Valley, Martin, and this is to Napa and other places don't do this, is in the county land, which I am in, and there's only 5 cities in the Napa County, but in the county land, which is 94% of land space, you can't operate a tasting room unless you have a manufacturing facility, right? You can't. So many of those wineries, of those 1,700 wineries that aren't wineries, they either have to go to a city to have a tasting room or they don't have one. And so we kind of found a thread, a loophole in all the legalities that these folks can pour under our license here. Some places don't do that. They just, either don't want the risk, don't want the responsibility. I'm cool with it because tell you what, the wines of Thomas Brown and Mike Smith and a couple of other wine guys we have in here, I want their customers in here because that helps me build the Tamber Bay brand. So that's actually just good for us. Just come in,
Right.
taste wines. Don't have pour Tamber Bay. No money's transacted. That's the one thing. They can't do any money transactions here. They have to do that technically off here, but that's easy to do. Yeah.
Right. They walk 1 foot off property and no.
Well, they take an order form and fill it out, right? They just
Right.
they
Exactly.
can take that and wherever they process it, that's up to them onto that. So
let me ask a little bit, because several people have tasted here, and when you taste at Tamber Bay, I promise you it will feel like you are being watched, and you are being watched.
yes.
But you're being watched by these fellows.
Yeah.
And it's an equestrian ranch. It's a rescue. So I'm curious, you developed a very, very fine palate through experience and exposure to wines and trial and error and practice. Where did the love of the horses come in? Because you can't think of Tamber Bay without thinking of an equestrian. It's all over your bottle. The vineyards are named after it. The winery is named after 2 horses. How did that come about?
So my story is different from almost every other person that rides horses or has horses. And I like to suggest that starts for most people, as it did for my wife, when she's like 5 years old. And I kind of think this is a bigger thread for female versus male. So I always kind of tease that there's a female gene called the horse gene that some kids get, some don't, right? And then when they do get it, it's that 5-year-old that has horse stuff all over the walls, right? And mommy, daddy, I want a horse, I want a horse. And that was my wife. And by the age of 14, she got her first horse. And this is what happens to most people, right? So they get the horse and they fall in love with the horse. They start doing something with it. And then they figure out that there's different true disciplines. Could be all the way from trail riding to dressage to jumper. Maybe people just have the horse or whatever. And that's how they do their horsing and they get into their stuff. Mine's a little different. I didn't ride my first horse until I was 38 years old. Being an ex-athlete of sorts, I did remain active as an athlete all the way through I still am in many respects. But here's how I got into it. I had a very good friend who did a crazy sport, absolute crazy sport of long distance horse racing. And this is 50 to 100 miles. It's all cross country. It's on one horse. It's one rider. And my friend was the rider. And he would spend 10, 15, 20 hours on a horse in one day. Some races, he would start in the dark and end in the dark. And I thought he was, I thought he was a complete idiot. I mean, why would you want to do that? I mean, that just didn't sound logical to me. One day he invited me to a race, a 100-mile race. He wanted me to crew for him along the way, bring him supplies, so forth and so on. Like, great. As long as there's a 6-pack of beer at every stop, I'll do it. And
I'm your man.
I got to the beginning. Well, I got the night before. And this is one of the biggest races in the world that takes place here in California. And I wish I had a picture of that now that we're talking about it, but I don't. At least have one readily available. Anyway, so we're at this place in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, and there's 250 horses, and all the people and all the spoken. And I've never been that close to those horses, and they're all magnificent. They're all about to do the hardest horse race in the world, 100-mile race. And I was blown away by their athleticism. I was just amazed by the camaraderie of the individuals with their horses and things of that nature. So I'm blown away to begin with. And so 5:15 in the morning, I'm not even there. The gun goes off and 250 horses start tramping down this trail. I catch up or they catch up to me at the first major checkpoint. And it's probably 38 miles out of there. And I just watched this amazing process of this race. And what I'm seeing is, people that are wanting to win. They're like pirates with, things in their teeth. But then I saw, elderly people, and the oldest one I think I saw was 74 years old. I saw kids. I saw groups of women going down the trail, them being funny, but, chatting away, not really competing, but just wanting to be there. And so I saw this whole mix. And it just intrigued me. I was more interested in the real competitive of this nature. So about halfway through it, when I got to another vet check with my buddy, I said, man, I got to do this. And he looked at me and says, well, dude, you got to learn how to ride a horse. And so at the end of the race, he finished very well, 13 out of 250 horses. He finished at 2:15 in the morning. Mind you, he started at 5:15 in the morning. And I started riding with him and his wife. They're very, very excellent riders. And they realized very quickly as we rode together in this beginning stages that I needed to ride in front of them. And why was that? Because at the beginning, I started riding behind them and they'd be going down trails and so forth. And all of a sudden they stop and this horse would show up without a rider. That's my horse. And I'd be coming, because I fell off. And they figured, okay, let's just put Barry out front. So when he falls off, we can stop. So anyway,
I like it.
That was in 1998. In the year 2000, I rode my first 50-mile race. I came in 13th place. I couldn't even fathom how you can do a 100-mile race. Could not even fathom. I was just, every bone in my body was sore. Took me about 7 hours. To make a long story short, in 2005, I won the 100-mile national championship in Montana. I won the gold medal in the Pan American Games in the team competition in Maryland. I was nominated to the U.S. equestrian team, and in 2016, I rode in Germany for the U.S. in the World Cup. So it was kind of look at here's what happened. Dead serious. Here's what happened. I got through that first race, and as tired as I was, as much as I was hurting, I said those very famous words that most golfers say: "I can do better next time." And I've been saying it ever since. And only a few times when I've won some of the biggest competitions had I not had to say that because I won it. But you finish something like that, or you do something, whether it's horses or bowling or whatever you do, all of a sudden you have this ambition. Man, I could have done that better. I could have trained better. I could have done this.
When you say 100 miles for the Midwestern folks, that's downtown Chicago to Milwaukee. So that's a 90-mile trek right there. And so that's a pretty good ride on horseback.
Yeah. And our races are a little different because it's all cross country. The race that I'm speaking about that my buddy did, that I eventually did do as well, I did it 3 times, has 40,000 feet of elevation change throughout that 100 miles. That's 7 miles up and down. My wife is hoping to do that, by the way, this summer. Again, she's done it 8 times. So anyway,
it might be faster on the Kennedy Expressway and then up 94 to Milwaukee, but 40,000 feet of elevation change would not be fun.
Yeah. So horses are big in our lives, clearly. And so when I started the business, I got to a point I had to name the winery, and I didn't want to use my name. I'm not of that camp. I didn't think that was important. By the way, that's my venture side coming out of me because I didn't want to sell my name. If I ever sold a business, I didn't want to sell my name. So I decided to name it something else. And so a good friend of mine that when I worked at Apple came over, and we were riding 2 horses, and I was telling her, what about this name? What about this name? And she's just like, Barry, you're overcomplicating the problem. The answer is right here. And I was riding a horse named Bayamo, and she is riding a horse named Tamberina, and their barn names were Tamber and Bay. She says, why don't you just call it Tamber Bay? And I was like, whoa, that's cool. Love the name. No trademark issues. And quite frankly, it meant something to me. But those were my first 2 horses. I've had 15 horses since then. My number 1 horse today, his name is De La Cruz. And though I can't name the winery after him, I do have a bottle out right now called De La Cruz, a Cabernet. That's pretty cool. So it's called it's De La Cruz. So there's the mix that started a long time ago, and I bought this property, which is right behind my head here, and the winery is this building right here, which was a covered riding arena. And I realized at the time that we bought this and we were going to do this and bring the winery here that we were marrying our horse and wine passions forever. They'll never be separated. And, it's what we live. The problem with that is, Martin, I chose 2 professions that both require 7/24 attention. So this notion of retiring went out the window. And but I did realize years ago, I'm not the retiring type.
I'm going to show people where you are. And for those of you that are new to Cellar Angels, Cellar Angels is 100% direct to consumer. So all the wines on our website, all the wines in our wine club are all from limited production wineries. Rarely will you find them in a retail store. You certainly won't find them in a retail store nationally because most of them don't even make that much wine. So we deal in the playground that we refer to as the wine region, and that wine region is exclusively and only Napa and Sonoma. Now, we love this playground because of its diverse topography. It's not 40,000 feet of elevation change. However, it is geologically a very, very unique place. many of you have heard me say it before, and it's worth repeating. It's classified as Mediterranean, and there's only 3% of the globe that has this climate. The interesting thing is that from Napa and Sonoma, that's not clicking, there we go. This is where we play. You have Napa County, you have Sonoma County. Tamber Bay is way up north, just almost on the property line. As a matter of fact, you could ride a horse and be there in a couple seconds. And here's what Barry is talking about with regards to his property. This is Tubbs Lane. You probably have all heard of Chateau Montelena. They're right in here. But the tasting and production facility is also the picture over Barry's shoulder. Was over your shoulder is right there. So this is an expansive property. You do not just pull into a parking lot and then walk into a tasting room. It is, you will drive slowly, please, past horses. And there's usually horses in these corrals, paddock areas and holding areas. And then you pull in, park, walk into the tasting room. You can taste indoors, you can taste outdoors, covered areas, gorgeous walk around the property. And the production facility that Barry talked about is all here. So when we all get together to make our wine, this is where it's going to be made. Now, the Chardonnay that is in the sip kit that I'll get to in a second, the Deux Chevaux, this is from this vineyard in Yountville. And for those of you that were on the Meet the Winemaker, our wine club members, you got to actually see and meet Bill Nancaro. And Bill is the winemaker, was the winemaker, executive emeritus for Duckhorn for 10 years. But Bill talked about how in Yountville, there is just some spectacular vineyards. And FYI, Goose Cross is right here. So he was talking about this underlying area south of Yountville that has some of the best grapes in the world. And here's where Barry sources. This vineyard is his vineyard. So you've got the Napa River, you've got the Rector Creek here. And I would like to know, Barry, why is this such a special piece of soil?
So back out just a little bit, because the special nature of where we are, just Napa Valley in particular, is you're seeing it now on the right-hand side. Those are the Vaca Mountains. And those were created 30, 40, 50 million years ago by volcanic activity. And it starts in southern Napa, it goes all the way up to Calistoga, where our winery is. Now, on the left-hand side, these are the Mayacamas. And these were under the ocean until 5 to 10 million years ago. So if you kind of put where my vineyard is, dead center to the most diverse soil places on the planet. And at the farthest point, they're separated by 1.5 miles. So then we take these millions of years of storms and earthquakes and all this stuff, and things that are very particular to the La Jolla area versus Angwin and Howell Mountain. A lot of it falls into the middle of the valley. And then we have the Napa River. It's the one tributary that takes all the water from the very north into the south, goes into the San Francisco Bay. And over the years, floods and everything have brought all this material together. Now, I stop right there. It's a perfect stop. This thing just to the left of us is Yant Hill. And Yant Hill is the largest hill in the middle of the valley. And that has a big aspect to what goes on, because it has a tendency to both block heat that's in the valley from moving. It also creates wind. And how it does that is as wind is coming down the valley and hits this hill, and it's, you're only 10, 20 feet up, it starts compressing. I call it the airplane effect. It's why airplanes fly, right? So wind goes over and under a wing and it starts compressing. So this area actually cools down very quickly. So you can be on the Napa River, which Martin has been showing you. And then there's this road going up on the left-hand side called Highway 29. The difference can be 3 to 5 degrees through the entire day, just in that little aspect to there. And that 3 to 5 degrees, plus all the soil diversity that has been developed in this particular area in dead center Napa Valley is what creates this wonderfully complex structure that we call Napa Valley wines. You go farther north, you don't get the complexity. You go farther south, it gets too cool to make Cabernet, right? And so the wine we're going to taste today, by the way, if you can now explode this, comes from a 2.5 acre block that are 40 to 45-year-old vines. And if you can get a bigger shot or a closer shot of that, Martin, just click down a little bit. Yeah. So go to the reservoir. And then if you kind of follow a little bit northeast on that reservoir, you'll see this diamond shaped, a block right there. That's where this Chardonnay is coming from. And I inherited it when I bought the vineyard 23 years ago. And it's a special Dijon clone that has never been sold in the United States. We still really don't know how it got here. We can only...
I think we do.
Yeah, I think we do. So we assume that it was suitcase cloned in, meaning someone took the clippings from somewhere in France and brought it here and put it here. It's an illegal process, but it happened all the time in the early days. And it has created for us one of our most sought after wines in our portfolio, one of the most unique wines in Napa Valley, because what we're about to taste is not a California Cabernet. It is a white Burgundy. It tastes like something out of, the Montrachet, Marseille, or some of the other areas of France. And it is truly phenomenal. And we're very, very proud of that. It was Thomas who really recognized that and, followed the protocols of how wine is made in Burgundy, which is far different than the way it is here in the United States. So that's where we're going with that.
There's quite a few people that are actually drinking the Deux Chevaux Chardonnay. It's a 2020, and how they're doing it is because they went to the Cellar Angels website and purchased a sip kit.
Yep.
And so I strongly encourage you to grab a sip kit. There's not many left of this Tamber Bay on the site right now that we're drinking, but the sip kit's going to give you 4 or 5 wines for the next 4 or 5 Fridays. And you get to drink along with gentlemen and ladies like Barry. So that can tell you all about the wine, tell you all about the production. And I'm curious, Barry, if we had some serious people on this call, of which we do, and they expressed an interest in, we can certainly get some capital together. We want to make a wine and we want to do it at your facility. What would your advice be?
Call me so I can talk you out of it because you're going in a market with, as you saw, 1,700 wineries in Napa Valley. Look at when I got in the business, there was 2,300 wineries in the United States. And now there's 1,700 in this little funky valley. By the way, Napa Valley only represents 4% of the volume of juice wine in California. So we're really small, 2.5% of the wine in the United States. And yet, we've got 1,700 wineries. So it's a very, very competitive market. So I try to tell people, if you're doing it as a professional hobby, go for it. It's great. But if you're actually thinking about doing it as a business, just make sure you're well capitalized and you have the interest. And I'm going to tell you, making the wine is the easiest part. It is the marketing of wine year over year that is extremely difficult. You got to stay on it, which is why this business for my family, not just me, is a full-time gig every day. And I couldn't be here where I am without my family and some great staff. At the end of the day, it's just about the people that surround you, that have faith in you and will do great work with fantastic integrity. So there's that. But if you really wanted to get into it, you can call me or you can look up other custom crush places and we can go kind of through the parameters of what it takes and how to do it. But the part that's kind of neat about this is rest assured that if you can find fruit, if you and your winemaker can find some fruit, by the way, this back to me is the Dijon clone that comes in that you're tasting. I don't know when this picture was taken. This actually could be the 2020 for all intents and purposes. So if you find the fruit and you can get it to us, so to speak, you're in good shape. We can take care of it. And then we work on things like, you work on things like what's your label design, what kind of bottles you want and so forth. And we kind of help with a little bit of that. But we just want to make sure we get all the product in time when the bottling occurs. So
I think you've actually made it very clear that this is an extremely difficult decision. So CBD dispensaries, it is. That's what we're going to be going on to next week.
That's it.
That seems to be a lot less hectic and not a million ways to lose money. I want to thank Barry for his time this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy to learn a little bit about custom crush facilities, and there is so much nuance to it, but it is fascinating that if you have some fruit and you have a winemaker or want to use one of your 4 winemakers, you can get the job done and you can produce some wine. So that's pretty cool. That's entrepreneurialism at its core. Certainly from an American standpoint, you can't do that just about anywhere else. Next week, by the way, we have Stephanie Trotter, who you want to talk about resilience, grit, and perseverance. She's one of 16 children. So you've got to grow up into a tough environment, which is why her Cabernet is, I don't want to say brass knuckles, but it is the quintessential steel fist and a velvet glove, because she sources it for some pretty pristine vineyards that are postage stamp and sized and only work with certain people. But she is terrific. Denise just put a link in. If you missed an episode, click on that link. You will be instantly subscribed to the Cellar Angels YouTube channel, and you can go there. And as you're walking, as you're jogging, as you're stuck in traffic, you can listen to these webcasts. We can't do this without you, Cellar Angels heroes. So thank you from all of us to all of you. And Barry, I want to raise a glass to you. Always illuminating, always educational, and most importantly, always fun. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Martin. It's always fun to play with you guys. You've got great audiences, and you're a fantastic host. Look forward to seeing you out here in Napa soon. So I can drink with you. Okay, man.
That's absolutely. Cheers, everyone. Be good to one another, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.